It was a quiet evening, the stars twinkling in the vast, ink-black sky, when Jonathan stumbled upon something he couldn't possibly explain. He had been on his usual evening walk in the woods near his house, lost in thoughts, when a soft humming sound drifted through the trees. At first, he thought it was the wind or perhaps a distant vehicle, but as he drew closer, the sound grew louder, more distinct, almost as if calling to him. Curiosity getting the better of him, Jonathan ventured off the path and deeper into the woods. The noise was now unmistakable, and he followed it until he reached a small clearing. There, to his shock, stood two figures, tall, slender, with shimmering green skin and eyes that sparkled like the stars above. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, their features delicate but alien, their expressions hungry. His heart raced, but fear didn't take over. He was too bewildered, too mesmerized by the sight of them. One of the creatures stepped forward, their long fingers beckoning him closer, her eyes never leaving his. "We are hungry," she said, her voice soft yet carrying a strange musical quality. Jonathan blinked, unsure if he had imagined the words, but the look of desperation in her eyes was clear. For reasons he couldn't quite comprehend, Jonathan nodded. "I can help," he muttered, his mind still processing the situation. He led them to his house, where he fumbled through his kitchen, trying to come up with something to feed them. He had nothing prepared, but there was always something in the fridge. As he opened cans of beans and heated them up, the two girls, aliens whatever they were, watched him intently, their eyes scanning every movement, every action. With a look of awe, one of the girls reached out with her delicate hands, taking the bowl he offered. She sniffed it, her nostrils flaring slightly. Then, with no further hesitation, she took a bite. The other followed suit, looking equally hungry yet cautious at first. Jonathan waited, feeling awkward but oddly proud that he was able to help. Minutes passed in silence, the only sound being the clink of utensils. And then, just when Jonathan thought this strange encounter might end without any further surprises, the two girls stood up. They turned toward him, their expressions shifting from hunger to something else, something deeper, something ancient. "Thank you," the first alien said, her voice now rich with emotion. The second one nodded in agreement, her eyes glowing brighter. Jonathan felt an inexplicable warmth in his chest, something he couldn't explain. A sensation as if he had unlocked a connection with something far beyond his understanding. Before he could speak, they both turned and, in the blink of an eye, were gone, leaving no trace behind. He stood there, the echo of their presence lingering in the air. Had it all been a dream? His mind swirled with possibilities, each more fantastical than the last. But then, a small note appeared on the kitchen table. He picked it up with trembling hands. It was written in a language he didn't recognize, but the symbols seemed strangely familiar, as if they were embedded in his very DNA. Jonathan sat back, staring at the note, a slow smile creeping across his face. Whatever had just happened, he knew one thing for certain: he would never look at the stars the same way again. ChatGPT said. The night seemed to stretch on endlessly as Jonathan sat in his kitchen, the note clutched in his hands. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the kitchen light, but his mind was far from the mundane details of his everyday life. He couldn't shake the image of the two alien girls, how they had moved, how they had looked at him, as if he was the key to something far more important than he could ever fathom. His eyes kept drifting back to the note. The symbols on it pulsed faintly, almost as if alive, and for the first time in his life, Jonathan felt a sense of purpose, a strange connection that tied him to something larger than himself. He wasn't sure how, but he knew that this encounter was just the beginning. The following days felt strange, as if the world around him had shifted. Everywhere he went, he noticed subtle things he hadn't before, the way the wind seemed to carry whispers, the way the clouds sometimes formed patterns that looked suspiciously like the symbols on the note. It was like the universe was trying to communicate with him, drawing his attention to things that were always there but had remained hidden in plain sight. One evening, while sitting by his window, Jonathan was startled by a sudden sound. It was soft at first, but it grew louder. A humming, the same one he had heard in the woods. His heart skipped a beat, and without thinking, he rushed outside. The moment he stepped onto his porch, a shadow passed overhead. He looked up, his breath catching in his throat. The girls were back. This time, they weren't alone. A third figure hovered in the sky, a larger silhouette with wings that shimmered like liquid light. The girls stood before him, their eyes bright with anticipation. "You have been chosen," the first girl said, her voice now resonating with a deeper, more commanding tone. "Chosen?" Jonathan echoed, his mind racing. "Chosen for what?" The second girl stepped forward, her eyes focused intently on him. "To help us, to protect the balance between your world and ours." Jonathan's confusion deepened, but his curiosity burned brighter than ever. "I don't understand. I'm just a regular guy." "Not anymore," the third figure, the one with wings, spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and otherworldly, but there was kindness in it. "You've been linked to something ancient. Your world, your universe, is at a crossroads. The balance is fragile. And you, Jonathan, have a role to play." The words hung in the air, and Jonathan's pulse quickened. He wanted to question them further, but the urgency in their eyes stopped him. They weren't asking for his belief, they were asking for his trust. Without another word, the alien girls led Jonathan to the clearing in the woods where they had first met. As they walked, he couldn't help but feel that the earth beneath his feet was alive with energy, pulsing in tune with his heartbeat. Once they reached the clearing, the ground began to shift. The trees around them seemed to bend inward, their branches twisting like fingers reaching out to touch something. At the center of the clearing, a strange glowing object emerged from the earth, its light casting shadows that danced like fireflies. "This," the first girl said, pointing toward the object, "is the heart of our connection. It's what binds your world to ours. And it's dying." Jonathan stepped closer, his breath hitching. The object before him was like nothing he had ever seen. It shimmered with colors that didn't seem to belong to any known spectrum, almost like liquid light. "Why is it dying?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because something has been disrupting the balance," the second girl replied. "Something from your world." Jonathan's mind raced. What could he possibly do? How could he help them? "You've already started," the third figure said. "The simple act of feeding us, the kindness you showed, has awakened something in you. A connection that runs deeper than you know." The alien girls and the winged figure stepped back, their eyes fixed on Jonathan. "You must now make a choice," the first girl said, her voice echoing through the clearing. "Help us restore the balance. Or watch both worlds fall into chaos." Jonathan's heart thudded in his chest. The weight of their words sank into him, but beneath the fear, there was a spark of understanding. This was his purpose. This was the path he was meant to walk. It wasn't just about saving them, it was about saving everything he knew. With a deep breath, he nodded, his voice steady. "I'll help. What do I need to do?" The three figures smiled, their eyes filled with a quiet gratitude. And just like that, Jonathan's journey into a world he never believed possible had only just begun. The stakes were higher than he could ever imagine, but for the first time, he felt alive with purpose. The connection between their worlds was in his hands, and he was ready to face whatever came next. ChatGPT said. The air around Jonathan seemed to hum with energy, the stars above glowing brighter, as if recognizing the weight of the decision he had just made. The three figures, each more enigmatic than the last, gazed at him with a mix of anticipation and trust. He felt the enormity of the responsibility settle within him, a deep sense of knowing that this was no longer a choice, but a calling. The winged figure, towering and majestic, stepped forward. "To restore the balance," he began, "you must travel to the place where the disturbance began. It's located in a hidden realm, between the fabric of your world and ours." Jonathan looked at the shimmering object in the clearing. It pulsed, sending ripples through the air, as if the earth itself was breathing. The light from it reflected off the trees and the figures before him, casting an ethereal glow on everything. "What is this disturbance?" Jonathan asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. He had no idea what he was about to embark on, but there was a certain peace in knowing that he wasn't alone in this, whatever this was. The first girl, her eyes now a deep, almost hypnotic shade of violet, spoke again. "The balance between your world and ours was forged long ago by the ancients. But something or someone has broken that delicate thread, and the fabric is beginning to tear. If it continues, both worlds will collapse into chaos, and no one will survive." Jonathan's heart skipped. Who would do such a thing? The second girl's expression turned grim. We do not know. But we have our suspicions. Someone, or something, has been siphoning energy from the heart of the connection. The only way to restore it is to find the source, close the rift, and heal the breach. And how do I do that? Jonathan asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The weight of the task was beginning to sink in, but he didn't feel fear. Instead, there was a fierce determination building within him, a conviction that this was his path to walk, no matter how impossible it seemed. You will need to follow the map, the winged figure said, extending his hand. This will guide you to the source. But be warned, time is running out. He handed Jonathan a strange glowing artifact, a small stone orb, pulsing with the same energy as the object in the clearing. The orb seemed to hum in Jonathan's palm, as if it recognized his touch. This map will lead you to the place, the winged figure continued. But only you can restore the balance. The trials ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet comprehend. Jonathan looked at the orb, his fingers tracing its surface. It felt warm against his skin, almost alive, and as if it held secrets that only he was meant to unlock. He nodded, trying to push aside the doubts that crept into his mind. He had no idea what kind of trials lay ahead, but he knew one thing: there was no turning back now. With a final glance at the alien girls, their glowing eyes filled with hope, Jonathan took a deep breath and placed the orb in his pocket. "I'll go," he said. "I'll find the source of the disturbance and fix this." The first girl smiled, her expression softening. "You have the heart of a warrior, Jonathan. You are ready." The winged figure stepped forward once again, his wings extending wide. "Time is not on your side, but you are stronger than you realize. Trust the map. Trust yourself." Without another word, the figures began to fade, their forms dissolving into the night like mist in the wind. Jonathan stood alone in the clearing, the forest around him as quiet as before. But something was different. The energy in the air crackled with purpose, and Jonathan knew that his life had changed forever. He turned and began walking, the glowing orb tucked safely in his pocket. His mind raced with questions, but he pushed them aside. He didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear: his journey was just beginning, and it would take him places he had never imagined. The path ahead was uncertain, but with every step, Jonathan felt more connected to something greater than himself, something ancient and powerful. As he moved through the forest, the map in his pocket seemed to grow warmer, guiding him toward an unknown destiny. Whatever trials awaited him, he knew he had to face them. And so, Jonathan's journey began, one that would take him to the very heart of the universe itself, where the fate of both worlds rested in his hands. The forest around Jonathan felt eerily still as he walked, the sounds of the night muted as if the world itself was holding its breath. His steps were steady, guided by the pulsing warmth of the orb in his pocket. With each step, it felt as though the distance between him and the heart of the disturbance grew shorter. The air was thick with an energy that was both foreign and familiar, as if he were walking through the veil that separated two realities. As he ventured deeper into the woods, the moonlight above began to fade, replaced by an unnatural darkness. Jonathan glanced around, his senses heightened, every shadow and rustle of the trees seeming to whisper secrets just out of reach. There was no doubt now. He was entering a realm where the rules of his world didn't apply. Suddenly, the orb in his pocket began to vibrate, growing warmer with each passing moment. Jonathan reached into his pocket and pulled it out, feeling a strange pull toward the ground. The stone glowed brighter, casting an eerie light that illuminated the path ahead. The map within it seemed to shift, the symbols changing with each passing second. At that moment, he realized he wasn't alone. Figures emerged from the darkness, tall, hunched shapes, their eyes glowing a fiery red. They moved silently, their bodies blending into the shadows, like wraiths stalking their prey. Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't stop walking. The orb continued to pulse in his hand, its light growing stronger, as if it were warning him. The creatures watched him from the edges of the trees, their glowing eyes never leaving his form. One stepped forward, its shape tall and imposing, its movements deliberate. "Turn back, human," the creature spoke in a low, gravelly voice that sent a chill through Jonathan's spine. "You do not belong here." Jonathan's grip on the orb tightened. His breath came in shallow gasps, but his feet remained rooted to the ground. "I'm not leaving," he replied, his voice trembling but defiant. I'm here to fix what's been broken. I won't stop until I do." The creature tilted its head, seemingly amused. "Fix it? You think you have the power to repair what has been torn? You are no match for the force that seeks to destroy the balance." Jonathan's eyes flashed with determination. "I've been chosen," he said firmly, "and I'm not afraid." The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as if assessing him. Then, with a sudden, almost imperceptible motion, it raised a hand and pointed toward the darkness ahead. The orb in Jonathan's hand pulsed once more, the light blindingly bright for a moment, before it dimmed again. "Follow the path," the creature said, its voice now strangely quiet. "You may have been chosen, but the trials ahead will be unlike anything you can imagine. Prove yourself worthy, or perish." Jonathan swallowed hard, his throat dry, but he nodded. There was no turning back now. He could feel the weight of the orb in his hand, its warmth offering him a sliver of comfort amidst the unknown. Without another word, the creature retreated into the shadows, and the others followed suit, disappearing into the darkness. Jonathan stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, before continuing down the path the orb had illuminated. The trees grew taller, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes as he pressed on. The air grew colder, the weight of the world around him heavy with the unspoken knowledge that the disturbance he was about to face was beyond anything he could comprehend. But he couldn't stop. Not now. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet trembled. The orb in his hand vibrated with an urgency he hadn't felt before. And then, ahead of him, a rift began to open in the earth, dark, swirling, and alive with energy. The symbols on the orb matched the ones that danced along the edges of the rift, and Jonathan realized that this was it, the source of the disturbance. He approached the rift cautiously, his breath shallow. The air felt thick with an overwhelming sense of wrongness, as if the very fabric of reality were being torn apart. The orb glowed brighter, its light piercing the darkness as it guided him closer to the rift. He reached out, his hand trembling, and placed the orb at the edge of the rift. The moment it touched the ground, the orb exploded with light, and the rift let out an ear-splitting screech. A dark force surged forward, like an unstoppable wave, crashing against Jonathan's mind and body. He fell to his knees, the pressure almost unbearable, but he clutched the orb tighter. The light from the orb spread, a brilliant beam cutting through the darkness and pushing the force back. As the light grew, the rift began to close, the dark energy retreating like a receding tide. Jonathan's body trembled with exhaustion, but he didn't let go. He couldn't. This was the moment. The light from the orb intensified, and slowly, the rift sealed itself, vanishing into nothingness. The forest around him grew quiet. The oppressive energy that had filled the air lifted, and for the first time in what felt like ages, the night seemed peaceful again. Jonathan remained on his knees, breathing heavily, his body sore from the strain. He looked down at the orb in his hand. It had gone dark, its glow fading, but he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The balance had been restored, the disturbance quelled, and the worlds had been saved. But just as he began to rise, a voice echoed through the trees. "You have done well, Jonathan." He turned, his heart leaping in his chest. The alien girls and the winged figure appeared before him once more, their expressions filled with gratitude. "You've passed the trials," the first girl said, her voice soft but filled with respect. "You've restored the balance." Jonathan felt a sense of pride, but also a deep, humbling realization. This was just the beginning. He had been chosen for something far greater than he had ever imagined, and whatever path lay ahead, he was ready to face it. The world felt different now, more connected, more alive, as if the threads between realities had been woven tighter. And Jonathan, standing in the quiet clearing, knew that the journey he had just completed was only the first of many. The universe had more to offer, and he had been given the chance to protect it. And he would not fail. As Jonathan stood there, the forest around him now peaceful, the weight of everything that had just happened settled in. The rift had closed, the disturbance quelled, and the connection between the two worlds had been restored. The alien girls and the winged figure stood before him, their forms glowing with quiet reverence. He had done it. The journey was complete. But a new understanding settled in his heart, a knowledge that this was only the beginning. "You have done more than restore the balance," the winged figure spoke, his voice resonating with ancient wisdom. You've proven yourself worthy, Jonathan. Not just of the trials you've faced, but of the responsibility that comes with the gift you've been given. Jonathan felt a surge of pride mixed with humility. He had been thrust into this incredible journey without warning, without preparation, yet here he stood, having faced unimaginable forces. But even now, standing on the edge of the unknown, he felt something deeper, something far beyond the tangible reality he once knew. The first alien girl stepped forward, her violet eyes filled with admiration. "The universe works in ways beyond understanding," she said softly. "But you, Jonathan, have become a bridge between worlds. A protector of the balance that holds everything together." Jonathan glanced at the orb, now dull in his hand, the light having faded completely. It had fulfilled its purpose, and so had he. But even as the physical manifestation of the connection between their worlds dimmed, a deeper, invisible connection remained. The second girl smiled, her gaze warm and comforting. "You will not walk this path alone. You are now part of something greater, something that reaches beyond the stars. And when the need arises, you will be called upon again." Jonathan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He wasn't the same person who had walked into these woods. The journey had transformed him, given him a purpose greater than himself. As the figures began to fade into the ether, their forms dissolving like mist in the wind, Jonathan felt a deep sense of peace. The forest was still, the stars above shining brighter than ever. The balance had been restored, but the journey was far from over. He turned and began his walk back home, the weight of the universe no longer a burden but a gift. And as he looked up at the stars, he knew, whatever challenges came next, he was ready.